Welcome to the channel. Grab yourself a coffee or maybe a nightcap and let me tell you a story about a scout named Nugget. Stick around. Thank you for watching. Today's episode is going to be about Nugget. Not traveling, not camping, but how we ended up getting her from rural Alaska to Anchorage and beyond, and what we've done to do that. So first off, I'll tell you a little bit about Bethel, Alaska. That's where we worked for 25 years. Bethel is 400 miles west of Anchorage, on the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. That's the land between the Yukon and the Kuskokwim Rivers. Bethel is located on the Kuskokwim River. It is the hub of that area. Bethel has about 5,000 residents in a community that's probably 5 or 6 miles across. There are no roads there. You cannot drive to Bethel unless you live in a village nearby and drive on the ice road. Everything that goes to Bethel, from Bethel, either goes in on a plane or in on a boat. And Nugget likely, I know that's how, it probably got barged out there many years ago, and we ended up flying Nugget out. So we have to go back, probably 2008. 2009, somewhere in there. My buddy Joe and another friend of ours named JoJo, so that's 3 Joes but only 2 people. They drove from Bethel, Alaska up to Antioch, Alaska on the ice road. The ice road isn't always open that high up. It's about 150 miles, river miles from Bethel. 135, somewhere, it depends. But about in there. They drove up, and my buddy Joe, who knows that I like scouts, knows that I've had a scout since 1999, and that I'm kind of interested in scouts. He saw it, took a picture of it with his phone, and emailed it to me. Probably, I'd say it was 2007 or 2008. So that was some years ago. Anyway, very cool. I look at the picture. Yep, that's a scout. And kind of let it go. Fast forward ahead to about, 2017, 16, something like that. My wife and I are talking, and we're getting ready to retire. We retired in 2020. And we were talking about something we could do that would be kind of an adventure and cool. Leaving Alaska and going to the lower 48. And she had this idea, because we like cars. We have some pretty cool old cars. We've got a Willys pickup truck. I've got, like I said, a couple of Scouts in Virginia. She now has a Scout Traveler. I've had MGs and kind of like weird old things. So she had this idea. Why don't we buy some kind of old vehicle on the Delta out there, fix it up, and drive it from Alaska to Virginia? And my first thought is, you're nuts. It's a long way. But then the more I think about it, the more I think, well, if we got something that was pretty old and pretty basic, we could make that happen. Something I could work on. I am not a mechanic. I've said it many times in these videos. I am an educator, a teacher. I worked at the district office in another department towards the end, where I was traveling out to villages and working with new teachers as an instructional coach, but I am not a mechanic. I am mechanically inclined. and I know how to watch a YouTube video. And I'm not afraid to screw up, which has helped. Anyway, so we look around, we find some old cars. We found this a Ford F100 that we looked at that was in pretty good shape for a Bethel vehicle. It had been sitting about 6 years or something. It had had a restoration early in life, and we thought maybe. But it didn't pan out getting it. Then we found a Jeepster, which I kind of, when I was a kid, I liked the look of them. And I thought, no, this would be kind of a neat ride. We go over and look at it. The price is right, like $300. But the motor's seized up, which isn't the end of the world, obviously. So I buy it, and we bring it home. Wasn't too long after that I kind of had this memory of that Scout. And we'd already bought the Jeepster, and we were going to kind of go forward with it. And I thought, well, I'll email, I'll try to find somebody in Antioch and see if they can figure out where it's at. Because if it's running, it'll be ahead of where the Jeepster is. Plus, it's a Scout, and I kind of like them. And I have one. I've got a V8 one in Virginia. I've had 23 years now. Anyway, I've had it since this mustache was in style. Okay, it was never in style. Anyway, so I go on Facebook and I find a business in Antioch, and it's a garage. I message the guy and say, any chance you've seen an old Scout in town? If I remember right, it was kind of brown. I couldn't find the picture anymore. So the guy responds to me within a couple of hours, or maybe even less than an hour, and says he knows where the Scout is. It's next door. And he knows the fellow that owns it. His name's Bob Olson, a really nice old sourdough from Alaska. Been up there, I would assume, most of his life. Anyway, he owns it, and he said he would talk to him for me. So now I'm thinking, well, how am I going to get it down? Because at this point, there was no road on the ice road, and they don't do it every year. So I wasn't sure exactly what we would do. I was thinking, if I make a deal, I might could float it down on a log raft. We did this every year. We brought firewood from upriver, 100 miles or more, built us a 40-log raft, and float the raft back to Bethel. Because we don't have trees. There's no trees down in Bethel. You can only do firewood from driftwood that comes down after breakup. So anyway, he talks to him, he messages me back, says that Bob would be interested in selling it. Tells me that he pulled the motor out because his daughter ran it without oil, and it burned up a bearing inside, and it was making a squealing noise. But he never rebuilt the motor, and it had been sitting there for 15, 17 years, something like that. So I tell him to tell Bob that we'll come up and take a look at it, figure out a way either in the spring after breakup, or I thought I might fly up. But as it turns out, a few months later, they put in an ice road to Antioch. And we thought, well, shoot, we'll just drive up and take a look. Took about 3 tries. I drove up. 2 tries we went up with Jason went with me once, and Joe, my buddy, went with me once. And but we didn't get there. The road blew in, whatnot, couldn't get through. Actually, with Joe, the road blew in. With Jason, I went to look at it, and we made it. We made it there. And I made a deal with Bob for the Scout. The body was in good condition. A little rust in the floor pans, no big deal. But the body itself wasn't bad. A couple dents and dings, but it only had 1 broken window, which was super rare for rural Alaska. And I make a deal with him. We shake hands. I tell him I'll come back and get it. Go back to Bethel. I talked my boy into going with me. He's going to ride up, and I say, well, just hook a rope to it and we'll pull it back. It's only 150 miles. We'll go real slow. But we got lucky. We went up there. The fellow that was next door who had the garage, who went and talked to Bob for me the first time, we get there, and he's got a backhoe. He digs it out of a snowdrift. He pulls it out. All 4 tires are still inflated. It's been sitting there, I want to say it was either 15 or 17 years. And he's super friendly fellow. He was excited for us to get it. He helped us get it all out. Great. He asked me how we're going to do it, and I said, well, I've got this big rope. We're just going to pull it to Bethel. And he started laughing. And he said, well, what would you do if a person had a tow hitch? And I said, I'd buy it. He sold me a tow hitch for $50. And he even came out with the drill and helped us put it in. You know, drilled it to the front bumper. This is when I didn't realize how those front bumpers are attached. They're not attached by much. But I noticed the bumper was wiggling, so I did put a ratchet strap from the bumper back to the axle and strap it really tight, which made it stay on. But yeah, it wasn't held on by much. Anyway, we pulled her back to Bethel. Worked like a charm. So now I've got a Scout in Bethel, motor in the back of the truck. The motor, I didn't have high hopes for it. It was on a pallet, buried in the snow. We dug it out. It had a tarp over it that had ripped probably 10 years earlier. I didn't have high hopes. But anyway, we get her back to Bethel. I ship the motor. I find a guy on the line, do some asking on Facebook groups in Alaska. Find a guy that rebuilds motors. His name is Robbie Huck. He has a business in Eagle River called Give Me Fuel, Give Me Fire Racing, I think. He builds hot rods. He builds dragsters. And I'm not talking little, I'm talking like big, long drag. I mean, he's big, huge motors. I message him, talk to him, tell him what I'm trying to do. And he says that he will, he'll give it a shot. It's not what he typically does. He's never worked on a Scout, but he will give it a shot. I have to ship the motor in on a jet. They fly it to Anchorage. Robbie picks it up and starts tearing it down. While he's doing that, we're working on the Scout. I have my son, who is a welder, weld me up some better brackets for a tow bar for the front, just in case. We got a long way to go, and who knows what'll happen. And so he welds a tow bar, or welds some brackets up to put the bumper on. I wanted it hidden, but I wanted to have a way to hook that tow bar back on. And so he helped me out there. My other son helped me reupholster the seat. We buy a kit and do it. It's not quite big enough because we put a little extra pad in for my butt, because I know we got a long way to go. So my wife adds some strips on to make it a little longer so we can get it bent under and hooked up, and the seat turned out beautifully. And I went shopping at the one place that rural Alaska has for everybody, and that is the dump. I went to the dump, and I scavenged lots of moldings for doors and the back gate, because I didn't want that thing rattling the whole way down. And I found a computer cabinet, a computer server tower cabinet. The door, the side, it was a little beat up, but I found some pieces. Anyway, so I used it to make a glove box that I bent. I used the paper glove box and cut me out a template and bent it up and riveted it and put it in. It turned out pretty nice. I used it to make the grill in the Scout. I cut it right out of the door of the cabinet. The piece of the door that was left we used to make a shelf to go across above the sun visors. That turned out great. It's been super helpful. Yeah, my youngest son wants to ride with me for some of the trips, so we took the back seat from that Jeepster. Actually, it wasn't from that Jeepster. It was a back seat that was sitting in there, but someone got it from a different Jeepster at some point, and it wasn't even connected. Anyway, so I made a bracket for it to sit in the Scout based on the one I have in Virginia. Kind of saw what it looked like. So out of a flat piece of steel and 2 bed rails that I found at the dump, I made a bracket to bolt that seat on, and so we have a back seat. Lots and lots of stuff. So while I'm doing all of that, Robbie is working on the motor. Tears down the motor. He's rebuilding the top. He gets it done, sends the block in to a place to have it bored and whatever, and they find a crack in it. So he's got the top rebuilt, but he doesn't have the block. I got to find another motor. My boy is always talking to me about putting, an LS swap or a big V8 or whatever, but I kind of want to go back with a 196. They're solid motors. They're dependable. Not super high speed motors, but things I understand. So we search around Alaska. I put out on all forums in Alaska, I'm looking for one. I found a handful of 152s and V8s, no 196s that I could find. But some guy tells me about a fella out in Wasilla, Alaska, that he's pretty sure has some internationals. And me and the wife and the kids are going to go in and go to the Alaska State Fair. It's in Palmer, Alaska, next to Wasilla. While we're there, I talked them into going over to see if we can find this guy. I don't have his address, but I have a road name, and we just drive around. Wasilla's not that big. And eventually I see a big grassy area for him of international trucks, and this has to be the guy. So I stop, talk to him. He says he's got a couple scouts that he doesn't really want to part with, but there's one maybe anyway. So we walk around and we're looking, and the more I talk to him, the less he wants to sell the scouts. He doesn't want to part them out. He would sell them all, he just doesn't want to part them out. I've already got a scout. So as we're walking back, my son literally tripped over a motor in the grass. Sure enough, it is a 196 motor sitting on a pallet in the grass. And this one's on a pallet out, but it's sitting to the side in a way that makes it impossible for water to get into the carburetor. And so I'm thinking maybe. I call Robbie. He comes and gets it, takes it back, tears it down, says it's perfect. Says it needs rebuilt, but he said there's no cracks, it's all good. So he rebuilds the bottom of that one, puts it all together. He doesn't have a lot of the extraneous parts like the fan and the alternator bracketry and things like that. And honestly, I didn't have them either. When the guy that I bought it from took the motor out, he lost all those pieces. He knew where they were. They were in this building that was about 2,000 square feet, and it was packed floor to rafters, end to end, and he said they're in there somewhere. The clutch, the dust cover for the transmission, all these things were missing. So I bought another Scout in Virginia that summer. Wasn't much left to the Scout, but the motor was there and all of the pieces were there. So I had those. Brought them back in my luggage. Talk about some weird luggage. I've had some weird luggage over these years. The radiator in my luggage was most interesting probably. Anyway, so I bring those back to Alaska. Robbie sends the motor back. I'm putting the pieces back on in my shop. So he's shipped the 600-pound, 580-pound motor back to Bethel. I'm putting it together, and I realized that the water pipe that goes on the front, not the hoses, but there's a pipe on the front, doesn't seem to line up. Like I can't figure out how to get it to go in, and I know it's just me probably. Nope. If you know a little bit about Scouts, you probably have already guessed what happened. But apparently there were two 196 motors. There was the 196 and the 196 improved cooling head. And the old motor that came with the Scout was a 196. And the motor I found in the grouse was a 196 improved cooling. And so the water jackets are different. And the pipe is different on the front. And it's all different. So now I have a rebuilt motor with a mismatched block and head. Call Robbie, I tell him about it. Lucky for me, when he mailed me my motor back, he mailed me back the head that went with the second motor because it was mine. I was thinking I don't need it, but yeah, sure. Well, good thing he did because I needed it. I ship it back to him. Things are 80 pounds a pop. I ship it back to him. He rebuilt that head, sent it back to me. I pull the other head off, put that head on. Weird thing is now, because we used the front cover from the old motor on the chain case cover on the new motor, I'm getting it all put back together, and I realize I don't have a fuel pump. Older motors had it on the side of the block. Newer motors had it on the side of the chain case cover. We used the old chain case cover on the... So, I have an electric fuel pump. Call it good. It's one thing I wasn't going to deal with. Anyway, we get it put back together. We get the motor put in the Scout with some help. Again, thanks Darren. And get her tuned up. Get her started with a little help from the family there. And we have a running Scout. So now I got to figure out how to get it from Bethel, Alaska, where there's no roads, to Anchorage, Alaska. I could barge it, but barging is expensive, but it's a little cheaper than flying. But you'd have to wait a month for it, and I don't want to wait a month for it. So I start thinking about how to get it on a plane. Well, it's at this time that pandemic happens. And we retire in the midst of that. I sell my house in Bethel. The new owner agrees to keep my Scout for 1 year. Because the airlines had shut down, I couldn't fly it out. I could have still barged it, but then I would have had to rent something in Anchorage for a month waiting on it, and I wasn't going to do that. So she kept it for a year. We left. We moved to Virginia, bought us a house. Last summer, we flew back up, and it's the season 1 episodes that are online there. And I flew back and got the Scout out of Bethel. I had to get some little short tires to get it out of town, but they held air long enough to get it on the plane. Problem was that the jet, its door was too small to get the Scout in. So I put little tires on it. It lowered it 3 inches, and then we could get it onto the plane, on Scout, or on the jet. I can't remember if it was a plane or a jet, but we got it out. It's very big. And then we got her on the road. We got her to Anchorage, got her unloaded, got new wheels, and played around last summer. And that brings us to where we are today. Yeah, cruising around. We got all the new brakes and things in the last episode. It is ready to hit the road. So join us next time, and we will be driving this thing out of the state of Alaska with any luck. Take care. Hey, please consider subscribing.